Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle, and today we're privileged to have with us Steve Olsher, who is America's reinvention expert. Steve, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on.
Hey, so I think that obviously we can spend about 4 minutes or 5 minutes reading through your bio, which is very storied and very vast and wonderful. And I've loved getting to know you by researching yourself on your website and your brand and all of that. So I'm just really looking forward to chatting with you today. So give us a little bit of background on how do you become a reinvention expert, obviously by doing it over and over and over again, but give us a little bit of clarity behind that.
Well, I will tell you this. You just become the poster child for what you preach and what you teach. And literally from the day of reckoning, which for me came when I was pretty young, to the tune of probably 13, 14 years old, where I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. Just knew I could never really work for somebody. I knew I was always just really wired to make $1 out of 15 cents, if you will. It was one of those things where I just literally kept bouncing from this to that to the other until I figured out exactly what my lane is and what it is that I'm truly good at. So I think I'm just really the personification of reinvention, which gives me the opportunity to position myself in that way for sure.
Yeah, and when you work with clients in this, one thought comes to my mind that I'm sure you've run across, which is kind of like shiny object syndrome, squirrel. Do you ever work with clients, and what do you do when you come across a client that wants to reinvent themselves, and then 6 months later they're like, let's do it again? You're like, hey, we never gave it enough time to get some traction.
Well, that is definitely part of the problem for most, especially those who are bitten by the entrepreneurial bug, is we are oftentimes more, let's just say we have more ideas than we do ability to execute. And so, reality for most people is they have that sort of that farmer with the field of half dug holes, is always looking for oil and stopping right before they hit. And it's really hard to know, am I close or am I still really far away? And unfortunately, unless you got a crystal ball, it's impossible to tell. But I know a lot of people do quit way too early.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that just kind of gets down to let's just do a little prep beforehand, and let's lay that intention that when we do this process of reinvention, which is not a checkbox and a checklist and now you're reinvented, it's a process. So probably it does go hand in hand that, you're going through that transformation and, let's let it set in. So I think that's the mindset that way. Let's talk a little bit about your book. I love the title, What's Your What? And I think it has a catchy flow, but I think it goes a lot deeper with determining what that one thing is that you need to focus on. So what brought you to focus on that and write that book?
Well, in authorland, they say you write the book that you most need. So for me, I've kind of gone down that path now for a long time, which is trying to figure out exactly why it is that I'm here and how I am naturally wired to excel, right? And I've done the Myers-Briggs and the What Color Is Your Parachutes of the world, and most of them just left me with more questions than answers, to be honest with you. And so after trying to figure out what those answers were and not having a heck of a lot of luck, I figured, look, there's got to be a way here to help people not just figure out we're an ENFJ or, whatever that is. It doesn't really give anything tangible to move forward with. But there's got to be a framework that allows people to actually hit the ground running and do something with what they figure out.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people are focusing on, the why aspect. Why are we here? What's the difference between the what and the why? How do those interrelate as well as what are the differences?
Well, we were fortunate. I consider it to be fortunate. We were fortunate enough to have Simon Sinek, the author of Start With Why, on our show, Reinvention Radio. And we had a nice little banter, a little debate there about the what versus the why. And although Simon will tell you it's just semantics, I think there is a pretty big difference between the two. The biggest difference being that I believe that you can absolutely choose your why. To me, that's something that is external. You can choose what your why is. You want to feed starving children in Africa. You want to provide clean drinking water to people in Puerto Rico. I mean, whatever it might be, you want to take care of your family. You can choose your why, and that's why you do what you do. But I don't believe that you can choose your what. I mean, on the cover of the book, What Is Your What, there's really only one graphic element, which is a DNA strand. And that's because I believe that your what truly has chosen you, and it's not that which you have chosen. And it really reflects how you're naturally wired to excel and what is, in fact, already there.
Yeah, it's almost like it reminds me when you describe that of like the SWOT analysis. I teach marketing strategy for some universities, and you always explain that to say the strengths and the weaknesses are internal to you and your organization, but the opportunities and threats are the external. So you've got to think about that now at the externally, how it affects the internal. So yeah, the what and the why, I can see that. So here's then the next step is, what are some ways that someone could start articulating their what?
Well, first it requires an understanding of the what is your what framework, right? And so the what is your what framework is comprised of three specific complementary elements, but they are singular and they are unique. One being your core gift, right? You are naturally wired to excel in a very specific way with a core gift, whether that's communicating or healing or teaching or enrolling, something of that nature. You have a core gift. Second, you have a primary vehicle that you'll use to share that gift. And that primary vehicle could be, if you're a healer, that vehicle could be something like massage. Mm-hmm. And then third is you have the people. And you have the people that you are most compelled to serve. And so it's the combination of the gifts, the vehicle, and the people that make up the what is your what framework.
I think a lot of times when people, sometimes you hear the fact of, well, how do you determine what your purpose is? And it's, what you were programmed and what is easy to, what you're passionate about. And I would suspect that that's, pretty accurate, but also pretty surface level. So it goes deeper than that. So when you say core gift, what if someone gives you a blank stare and says, I don't know what my core gift is? So what are some ways that they could think of and define and flesh out their core gift?
Yeah, and look, reality is I think we put way too much pressure on ourselves in trying to figure out what our purpose is, so to speak, because we don't, in my way of thinking, we don't really have a singular purpose. I think that our lives are organic. Our lives are fluid. They're always evolving. And so reality is you're going to do different things over the course of your lifetime. That's just the nature of the beast. And that said, though, I do think that while the vehicle and the people can change over the course of your life, I do think that the gift remains stagnant. I mean, that remains consistent. Now, you are a teacher, you are an entertainer, you are a communicator, whatever those things might be for you. That's not going to change. That's going to be consistent. And so for those who are struggling to really figure out, what their core gift is, I think it really just boils down to taking a step back and giving yourself the time and the ability to really look at where in your life you naturally excel. And you'll find patterns, you'll find themes. And, it may, if you were an athlete and you weren't necessarily the star player, but you were really good at getting people to rally around you, to fight for a common cause, then you may, in fact, have some degree of communication, as your core gift. But again, we have to take a step back and really look between the lines and see if we can't find a theme that exists over where we've been, where we found success.
Do you think that there's any little, triggers or little helpful thoughts that would help that along? And the one I'm thinking of, I kind of feel like is, age-old cliche statement of, if you could do anything you want and knew you wouldn't fail and had all the money in the world and all the time in the world to do it, what would you be doing? And it kind of opens yourself up to go, well, shoot, I'd get out of that factory job that I've got, working 9 to 5, punching the clock, and I would, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Do things like that help open up someone to think a little bit more freely than normal?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously those things are cliche and tried and true because they work. Tony Robbins talks about success leaving clues, and that's why people refer to those sort of statements, because it works.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily being cliche, but I will say this, that you can't necessarily make a living from what it is that you would do even if you didn't get paid a cent to do it. You have to put money into the equation. I don't care who you are. Unless you've got that trust fund and that silver spoon, you got to figure out how to bring money in. And so it just, never working a day in your life or whatever you want to call it. I mean, that's all well and good, but it's kind of, it's kind of hooey when you come right down to it, because most of us still have to bring in money. So it has to be a combination of the two.
Yeah, that's kind of a good point, because there's a lot of things that you would love to do. I'd love to be a beach bum, or I'd love to be a whatever. Right. But then think of it like this. Then you kind of get back down to, is that something that is going to further make an impact in the world? Because there are some of those those selfish things that would be great, but after 2 months of doing it, then you're bored to tears. But there should be an element of providing value back to your consumer, your target audience, the world in general, that kind of thing. So that could help define and flesh out that what as well.
Yeah, and is it sustainable? Is it something that you could literally do every day? Would it inspire you to do it every day is a good question. And in the book, What is Your What, I take people through that process of figuring out what I call the 7 seeds of your soul, which help you to tap into what that core gift is. And one of the questions is, would doing this inspire you every day? And for a lot of folks, it's nice to think about, and might be some fun to do whatever that activity is temporarily. But if they really are sufficiently honest with themselves, they recognize that, it's kind of fun to do it for a little while, but I couldn't see doing that on a continuous basis. Yeah,
that's a good point. So what do you think that people really make the biggest mistake when approaching a reinvention, kind of a mindset or approach? Because I'm sure that sometimes people would go, I need to do that, and then they kind of get a little bit off track. Where does that tend to go?
Well, from what I've seen is just inaction. Because the reality is you're not going to be able to figure it out just from putting notes on a piece of paper. I mean, my book is more workbook-ish, and you put notes on that paper and you get to answers. But all of that stuff is for naught unless you put it into action. And so what I tell folks is, if you're not really sure about what it is, just go out and do something fairly related to it, whatever it is. And even sometimes you got to go on concurrent paths doing a couple of different things. But by doing it, you'll figure out if, in fact, it's something that truly puts fire in your soul. And for most people, it's the doing that really opens up the doors to, okay, this is exactly what I should be doing.
In your book, you mentioned the 4 paths. Can you talk a little bit about those from a 30,000-foot view?
Yeah, there's 4 types of people that I have found, and each of us are walking on one particular path. And that sort of 30,000-foot view, if you will, of each path is, number one, you've got what I would call the birther. The birther is someone who really has known, from day one who they are and what it is that they love doing. Very few of us actually walk on that path. And those are kind of the people we hate, because they're just so clear about who they are and what they're here for. there are some people who are fortunate enough to be on that path. Most of us are not on that path. So you have the birther, you have the shifter, and then this is someone who basically has to make a subtle shift to the what is your what equation. So maybe they know what their gift is, and maybe they know the primary vehicle that they want to use to share that gift, but they're maybe not serving the right people, and it doesn't quite inspire them as much as they would like to. So they just have to make a shift to that what is your what framework in order to really get things to gel. So maybe the people just have to change, as an example. Then you have the reinventors, and those are people who literally do sort of that 180, and they, were an attorney, and now they're now they're a chef on a yacht in the middle of the Caribbean, or something like that, right? Just people who you kind of scratch your head and go, Jesus, you were just doing this, and now you're doing that. How did that happen? And it's usually because they have found truly what it is that they just love doing. And then, of course, you have the wanderers, and that is going to be a reflection of the majority of the people who walk this planet. And those are people, I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but those are people who the light switch really hasn't gone on yet, where they have the understanding of, okay, I guess it really is possible for me to do something that I'm good at, that I love doing, and that I can get paid exceptionally well to do. And they just kind of go through their 9 to 5. And look, I'm not knocking it, but that's what I would classify as the wanderer's path.
Mm-hmm. And that reminded me of something even my wife recently said about a couple of her kids. One is an overachiever and really makes themselves just get perfect, great grades and studying all the time. And then one of them is great and wonderful, but if they get a B, whatever, and it doesn't bother them. Whereas the other one is like, oh my word, a B, that's horrible. So sometimes there's some people that you or I or someone might go, they are not an overachiever. They're just coasting through life, but yet they're happy. They're making a difference. They're doing some things. They're following some passions, but they're not setting the world on fire. But there's no rule that says they need to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes the world go round.
Yeah.
When the book "What Is Your What" came out, there was a bunch of debate in the Amazon comments there about who's going to pick up the garbage and that sort of thing.
Uh-huh.
And it's like if everybody has something that they're truly fired up to do and they're out there doing it, who's going to be doing the other stuff that that needs to be done? And look, reality is what is right for you isn't always going to be right for me, and vice versa. So maybe for that person who's picking up the garbage and doing their thing, maybe they actually like the solitude of doing it and just serving their community.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's when then the Pareto's principle, the 80-20 rule kicks in, where it's like you're never going to have everybody doing whatever. You're going to have a good mix of people, and that you're just kind of majoring on the minors at that point. So, hey, Steve, what's the best way that someone, if they're looking at, hey, what path am I on, and what about my core gift, and actually, what is my what? I'd like to pick up a copy of your book. Where would you direct them? What's the best place on your website to direct them to? And let's let them grab the copy of your book.
Sure. Yeah, we keep it pretty simple. So it's just simply whatisyourwhat.com. So if you go to whatisyourwhat.com, you can pick up a free copy. We actually give away the entire book of my New York Times best-selling book, What Is Your What? Discover the One Amazing Thing You Were Born to Do. So, yeah, whatisyourwhat.com. You can go there and you can actually grab the entire book for free. Excellent.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful getting to know you.
Appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.